Good morning, all participants. I hope you are doing fine. Uh, Today we have with us Dr. Naga Ratna Biradar. Uh, Ma'am is the principal scientist AE and OIC ICAR IGFRI SRRS Dharwad. Ma'am is going to deliberate on socio-economic dimensions of forage production. Ma'am, I handle control on to you, and you will be able to talk to the participants. Please start with the presentation. They are able to see you,
Lakshmi.
they are able to hear from you, and they are able to see your presentation as well. Please start, ma'am.
Okay, Nasir, can I start now?
Yeah, sure, you can start now.
Hello?
Yeah, you can start.
Yes. Yeah. May I know how many of them have joined? Hello?
Right now, about 85 and people are joining still. 85
Okay,
people,
okay. Anyway,
85 people are joining. And
okay.
there are people are continuously coming into the session.
Okay, okay. Anyway. Okay, very good morning to all the participants who have connected to me virtually. And a very warm hello to all of you from a southern part of the country, Dharwad. Before starting my presentation, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Nagaratna Biradar, presently working as a principal scientist as well as officer in charge of Indian Grassland and Fodder Research Institutes, Southern Regional Research Station, Dharwad, in Karnataka. And I have an experience of about 25 years. Since beginning of my joining, I'm continuously serving the same institute. My specialization is a social science, that is agricultural extension. So the topic given to me for the today's lecture is socio-economic dimensions of forage productions. Well, before I start the presentation, if any questions you have, please hold on till the end, and after the completion of the presentation, I would be taking your questions. We all know that in our country, India stands first in livestock numbers, as well as it stands first in milk production. When country stands first in milk production, the very question one can ask is then why the fodder crops, why the forages? Anyway, we stand first in milk production. That question obviously comes to anybody's mind. But what we need to understand is though we have a large number of livestock, but we are very poor when it comes to the productivity aspect of the milk. The milk productivity per animal is comparatively low in the country. And the contribution of agriculture, the country's GDP is though reducing. We all know, which is indeed a very welcome move. But when it comes to the contribution of livestock to the agriculture GDP, it is ever increasing. So the livestock contribution to the agriculture is ever increasing in the country. One of the reason for this is in many instances, livestock is viewed as a commercial industry. Farmers owned by the small and marginal farmers. A large chunk of livestock is continued to be owned by the small and marginal farmers. Here I have given some of the figures, and you can make out that nearly minimum 3% of any type of livestock you take it, they are owned by small and marginal farmers. That means we are nearly the 3/4 of the livestock population is owned by small and marginal farmers. This indicates that lot of the income for the small and marginal farmers is still coming from the livestock sectors. So if we want to aim at bringing in more equality among the farming sector in the rural areas, then making livestock profitable is the only option available. It continue to matter more because the country is aiming at bringing at income equality, and if we have to bring at income equality, and then we need to emphasize on the livestock rearing. So, though we say this, but how to do it? When we say that we want to increase the profit level of livestock rearing and add more income to the small and marginal farmers, when we think of enhancing the farmer, then only way to do it is by forages. One of the reasons why forages, which are never considered as a commodity in the Indian condition, are gaining importance is one main reason is decrease in the availability of crop residue in the country because of many reasons. One of the reason for decrease in availability of crop residue is increased cultivation of the hybrids. Most of the hybrids are aimed at increasing the food grains and reducing the crop portion or reducing the plant portion. So ultimately, hybrid cultivation has led to decrease in the crop residues. And that many of the hybrids are dwarf types. They are very short in their height. And most of the farmers, especially those who have a irrigation, they have shifted to the commercial crops, be it cotton, be it sugarcane, and or arecanut, or any of the commercial crops of the region. And most of these commercial crops have a crop residue which have a very poor fodder value. So the commercial crop cultivation led to decrease in the crop residue. We can say that. At the same time, when we look at the livestock population, and the livestock population in the country increased mainly of crossbred types because of the government policy of breeding, artificial breeding or artificial insemination. We now witness a large population of the crossbred livestock. When we say crossbred livestock, then what happens is they have to be fed very well to realize their full potential. But realize their full potential, what farmers are doing is, because they have a less crop residue availability and they don't get any of the green fodder, because when we look at another part of it, most of the green fodder they were getting it from the grazing lands, and now the grazing lands have shortened so much because of many other reasons. One of the reasons could be encroachment, and whatever the little land is available, they are overgrazed and nothing is left to the animals to feed it. So they don't have either crop residue quantity, nor they have a very productive grazing lands. As a result, what farmers are doing is they are depending more and more on concentrate feeds. The moment they depend more on their concentrate feeds, that means that they are increasing the expenditure on livestock rearing. So nearly the statistics says that nearly 65 to 70% of rearing of livestock is of fodder and feed. So if we have to reduce this expenditure, if we have to make the animal husbandry profitable, the only option available is to encourage farmers to cultivate the fodder crops. So the profit of livestock husbandry could only be altered by encouraging the farmers to cultivate the fodder crops. So in this scenario, fodder really gains importance. So what are the socioeconomic challenges? Because I have been given a topic to speak on socioeconomic challenges, but we can categorize these challenges into two. The one dimension is of institutional support for technology transfer of fodder innovations. What is the institutional support the country provides to transfer the technology on fodder innovations to the farmers? That is one dimension. And second time, there are some hidden challenges in the fodder crop per se. So we will look into each one of them more. I will emphasize definitely on fodder crop per se, but we'll within one slide. In one slide, we'll just see what is the institutional support available today in the country for transfer of the technology. Coming to the institutional support, the general structure available across the states in the country, because agriculture is a state subject and the departments are owned by the state government. If we see the institutions which are involved in the transfer of technologies of agriculture, we have a different four main line departments. The one is agricultural department. Second one is animal husbandry and veterinary services department. We have a horticulture department and we do have a forestry department. What these individual departments are doing is they are focusing on their main mandate crops. For example, agriculture department, what it is emphasizing is that only the principal crops of the region, which are those crops large area, are being focused by the agriculture department, and they are emphasizing on the transfer of technologies of only those crops. Coming to the animal husbandry and veterinary services department, which is bit close to the fodder innovations, but majorly they are focusing on veterinary aspects, on treatment aspects, and on health aspects of the livestock, and less on nourishment or less on new stock. Because this department is definitely headed by the veterinarians, and they have been educated mainly to do the diagnostic and treatment part of the livestock, and less they are educated on the forages. So even in this department, forages takes a back seat. Coming to the horticulture department, you all may be wondering how the horticulture department is related to the fodder crops. It has got a relation definitely, because the farming per se, every farmer has got the crop, animal, even he has got some of the fruit plants or trees for that matter. So everything is interlinked here. But horticulture department, again, it is emphasizing on vegetables and fruit and flower crops. So they are also not dealing with any of the fodder related issues. Coming to the forestry department, yes, it is also involved in promoting the tree cultivation when it comes to the also never give a thought about multipurpose trees species. Their main emphasis is on production of the wood. So nowhere actually prominently the fodder crop is fitting into either of these departments. Besides this, we do have a Krishi Vigyana Kendras, and they are doing to some extent trying to transfer the fodder innovations. The federations are working in some of the states, and Milk Federation, as I can say that till a decade before, they never employed any of the agricultural graduates. All their staffing pattern was dominated by the veterinarians. And only in 10 years or so, we are seeing there is change in the change in their policies of recruitment, and they are slowly hiring some of the agricultural graduates, mainly to ensure that fodder cultivation increases and the farmers takes up the fodder cultivation. We have some of the civil society organizations or NGOs which have started their NGOs mainly to the cater to the needs of the livestock farmers. Here I would like to take the example of BIFE. BIFE basically started with the intention to promote livestock husbandry, and simultaneously is doing some of the works of this one, encouraging farmers to fodder crops. Besides this, we also have a private companies. We have a private segments where there is in food crops are dominating. They may be dealing with the seed production and seed sale or fertilizer or pesticide. They have a good business. But when it comes to their businesses on fodder aspects, only few, like we can just count, hardly 3 or 4 are into the fodder seed production and seed sale. But when it comes to most of the crops, what they're dealing is only the annual fodder crops. Maybe I can take the example of fodder maize here, and some of them are doing on fodder sorghum. But when it comes to perennial fodder crops, it is almost nil. Yeah. So this is the institutional support what is available now to reach the fodder technologies to the farmers. But when it comes to fodder crops per se, like what are the socio-economic challenges associated with the fodder crops? I will only few of the things, only 3 or 4 aspects which are very closely associated with the fodder crops. See, when we say the fodder crops, then if I ask any one of extension person to name the fodder crops, then he or she could spell out the names like Bajra Napier hybrid, Guinea grass, road grass, Styloxanthus, Cenchrus, Bracharia, Chrysopogon, Sahima, the list continues. And if we look at the names of these fodder crops, yeah, you can see that they all sound very different. They are no way familiar even with the vocabulary of the educated person. Then how about educating with the farmers? They cannot, these names cannot get connected with the farmers' vocabulary. The vocabulary they are familiar with, like in the food crops. If we say that rice, bajra, they get connected, they understand, the picture of the crop comes into their minds. But when we say that you need to grow the Bajra Napier hybrid, then immediately you will find that they get perplexed. Then what is this crop they are telling it? So the first challenge for any of the fodder extension person is to make the farmers familiarize with the very name of these crops. Because when we say that these crops, any crop or anything in life which is new, because these names are new, anything in life, maybe for us or for the farmers, anything new is accepted, or it is accepted with a sort of skepticism, or there will be a initial inertia for change, like I don't understand all these things, I just don't want to do it. So the first challenge for any of the worker, any of the extension person, is to make them understand these crops. My experience of working with farmers for 25 long years has taught me 1 or 2 lessons. The moment I go to the farmers and ask about the fodder crops, the names they refer to are entirely different. Some of the crops they say is hybrid grass. They just say it's a hybrid grass, or it is an English grass. Or they will say that because I work in a Dharwad city, some of the seeds and root slips have gone from the Dharwad center, the grass. We try to educate, I try to make use of the vocabulary used by the farmers to start with, and slowly I'll try to introduce the new names to the farmers. So it is promoting fodder crops or transferring the fodder technology is challenging because of the so many issues involved with the so we need to find about the names of the fodder crops itself. Now, these crops, whatever the crops I have mentioned in my previous slides, they have not been cultivated by them. Like for example, if I say to the farmers, you cultivate this sorghum variety, which is a new hybrid, they immediately understand. But when they have not cultivating these crops, out of the box. So when they are out of the contest, how to educate them? The one of the ways is to educate them is to bring them, get them to see the crops. That is very important, so that they will understand, okay, this crop means it is like this. So they need to understand the crops. That means they should be enabled to see the crops in the field, more specifically in the field. But also, if it is not possible, now we have a lot of social platforms or internet enabled ICT platforms. We can at least put a lot of pictures and less of words. That could also be one of the way of transferring the to fodder crops. But having said this, what is more important crop is this fodder is cut and fed to the animals. So the farmers, the way the farmers look at these crops are different. Like they say, whether it is soft or is it hard? Whether should I feed it directly or feed it? For all these questions, if we need to answer, the best way ensure that they are brought into the research station or a extension unit where we can show them these crops in the field. And that really helps, according to me, because my experience, really, whenever I have done this, what I have seen is adoption became very quick and spread even between from farmer to farmer was very fast. So this could be one of the crucial aspect. What happens is when you bring the farmers to the field is they not only see this crop, but also they try to touch the crop. They will try to see how soft it is, and they can even see whether the crop has got some hairiness, because they have their own indicators. If it is crop where the stem portion is having a nest, then they immediately understand it is less edible, it is less palatable to the animals. So this will enable them to decide the properly, and also they can taste it. Even if we allow them to visit and touch the crop, they taste the stem and see whether it is whether it is sweet or not. So this is very important point, but it is very difficult task. One of the reason is most of the government organizations are again focusing on the food crops, and those who are into fodder crops are only very few government organizations are involved in this. But having said this, what I have told earlier is none of the private sectors are involved in this. So the onus is mainly on the public sector. All of the extension workers working in the government organizations so need to consider this, need to understand this, and we need to understand that if we want to begin with the extension of fodder innovation, if we want to make the fodder farmers to understand that, look, this fodder is no more a crop residue, it is a commodity, and if you want to decide on this by seeing the crop, by touching it, by experiencing the taste, and then making the decision. This really helps. This is in fact a time-consuming task, but it's worth working out and it's worth trying. We classify the fodder crops mainly into two categories. We do classify in different categories, but one of the main categorization is we classify the fodder crops as annual fodder crops and as well as the perennial fodder crops. See, annual fodder crops, most of the farmers, they understand. With the fodder bajra, fodder sorghum, fodder maize, fodder kopi, they understand it. But when it comes to the perennial crops, then as I have mentioned, they don't understand understand not only the names, even the cultivation aspects. It's difficult, but ensuring the animals round the year green fodder is must. If when we talk about round the green year for green fodder, then we have to look into the perenniality. When it is a perennial crops, if it is a irrigation, yes, fodder is available throughout the year. And if it is not irrigated, if it is a rain-fed, we can intervene through some of the fodder shrubs or fodder tree species and encourage them to get whatever little quantity of green fodder they can. Because feeding green fodder certainly enhances not only the yield of the animal as well as it brings in good health of the animal, which is very important when we look into the productivity component or in terms of calving intervals or milk production or meat production. That's very important. So when we are talking about perenniality or perennial crops or round the year green fodder production, then perennial component has got its advantage. But one of the aspect what we have to consider in here is that as per the NSSO report, the average land holding of farmers in our country is only 1.07 hectares. So when it is so less, then no farmer comes forward to block their land for 3 or more years. Yeah, it's a difficult task. They may not come forward, but what happens is if you involve your time, convince them that every year you need not to prepare your land, so no cost involved in land preparation. Every year you need not to bring seeds, purchase seed, take up the sowing and cultivate. Then then he may understand that yes, even blocking a part of his land may give a good benefit. I did this effort in many of my extension activities because whatever I'm talking today is I have never done, honestly, I have never done any of the extension on annual fodder crops because I got convinced that it is the only perennial fodder crops that have a best answer for the farm families. So all my work all over the 25 years is mainly on perennial fodder crops. But initially to make farmers to understand and to get their to cultivate perennial fodder crops was really tough task for me. But as soon as they are convinced and as soon as they start cultivating only 100 square meter of land, but next 2-3 years, I could see that the area under this perennial fodder crops not only increased, but those farmers became ambassadors of transfer of fodder innovation technology in their own area or in rough villages. So it involves a time as well as the effort, but at the end, we do have a situation, both the extension person, the person who is into the dissemination of the technology, as well as the end user, we will realize the win-win situation. Perenniality, I myself is always considered as an advantage because of it saves lot of recurring cost involved. So we may convince the farmers that growing a perennial fodder crops, though involves continuous use of land for few years, but it gets good fodder throughout the year, and which is very crucial for the livestock production. See, one of the aspect of fodder production is at what time we need to harvest. This is very important. It's not just the cultivation of the fodder crops, but educating the farmers about the right time of harvest is very important. I'll tell you why. There are some of the crops, like for example, Bajra Napier hybrid, which grows very tall. It grows so tall that, and it's very responsive to the whatever the fertilizer you apply, it responds and grows very tall in the ground. But allowing the crop to grow so much tall is also not advised. The stem becomes really hardy and the animals will not enjoy or relishing it. Yeah, they don't relish this very hardy crop. But what farmers usually do, these crops grows very fast. Within 20 days, they get a considerable growth of this crop. So immediately, because for them, fodder is so much essential, they immediately harvest and feed it to the animals. Even early harvest is not at all suggested. One of the reasons to harvest the crop early, the translocation of all the nutrients into the plant portion has not yet happened. It's only the water portion. So it's indirectly through the plant you are feeding water to the animals. So this is also one of the concern. So what is more important, you must educate the farmers to harvest the crop at right time. Then only the required nutrients are made available to the animals. This is very important when it comes to harvesting of the fodder. So as an extensionist, we need to educate them that it's not just growing the fodder. Whatever right time to harvest, they have to maintain that cutting schedule. This is very important. Then only they can have a good quality fodder. But there are some of the factors involved if we encourage farmers to harvest early. Some of the fodder crops, for example, if we take annual fodder crop like fodder sorghum, then they have an nutritional factor like HCN. If we take a perennial crop like fodder bajra, then oxalic acid levels are very high when we harvest at an early age. And if we take most of the fodder tree species, most of them have anti-nutritional factors at different levels. So educating the farmers about the harvest schedule, and after harvesting and management, I have mentioned here one of the point as the management, especially when we ask the farmers to harvest any of the fodder trees, it's better to educate them to allow them to wither for it there itself in the field for minimum 4 to 5 hours. Once it dries a little, then it's best time to feed it. So even the management aspect becomes very important. I have emphasizing here only the cutting management. When it comes to the management, there are many other aspects. Probably some of the other speakers might have told you, because it's a perenniality. Some of the fodder crops respond, for example, for a very mild burning in the summer, then you will get a more tillers. And there are some of the management aspects like you have to earthing up of the soil to the crop essential. So these are some of the management. Probably those who have spoken about the production aspect might have told. But when it comes to the harvest and management, as an extensionist, our role is to educate the farmers that you need to harvest at right time. When you harvest at right time, then only the required nutrients are made available to the animals. Then the fodder crops is duration for harvesting and management. See, capacity building is because of the new crops. Because the very name of the crop is different, and they are not seen. Most of them are out of the box crop. I would advise that the training have to be invariably in a very small group. That must be the first criteria. And second thing is, we have so many crops, the crops that can come up in 250 mm rainfall to 3000 mm rainfall. We have a wide range of fodder crops, but we need not to cover all the fodder crops at a time. We can select hardly 3 to 4 fodder crops for training the farmers. Those who can come up in those areas, we have to cleverly select them, and we have to educate only on crops. That is very important. And what is important is when we are trying to teach on an entirely new area. So what is important is we need to be a bit creative on how we while while educating the farmers. And for example, if I say that if this is the Bajra Napier hybrid, if I say about this crop, then you need to make them understand why it is a Napier hybrid, why it is a Bajra. Because Bajra is our own crop, Napier is a grass which was growing in an African continent but was not having a fodder value. These two were crossed and they are named as a Bajra Napier hybrid, and its inflorescence just appears like a bajra. It resembles like a bajra inflorescence. Then the farmers will understand it. Then that helps them to relate, and that helps them to keep the names of the crops in their mind. So the whole of the training process need to be very creative. It need to be, we need to start really from the scratch. For example, if I say loosen, why the loosen? Like, because in Kannada we say loosen as a kudre mente. Why it is called so? If we emphasize on that aspect, then the farmers will understand that. In Kannada, if the kudre is nothing but a horse, so the kudre mente is a fodder for the horse. Why they say it is for the horse? It was introduced in our country by the Britishers to feed it to the horse. And that not only generates interest to learn more, but also makes to retain whatever is learned. So the whole process need to be very creative, and for that you need to have the content processing, what you are going to speak. But when I am talking about the content processing, one of the important aspect here is when we talk about the fodder crops, the benefits are never direct benefits. They don't get the direct benefits. It's always the indirect benefits. Like animal health gets improved or milk production gets improved. So everything is through the animals. So they are indirect benefits. Unless and until they are involved in trading the fodder as such, then only we can say that they have grown the fodder, cut it, sold it, then the direct cash is in their hand. Then only they can realize the direct benefit, but it's most of the time indirect benefits. So one of the aspect could be educating the farmers about the multiple benefits of fodder crops. I'll just cover in the later slides like what are the multiple benefits one can realize by growing the fodder crops. But it's good to educate the farmers in the training program about the different benefits from the farmers can get by cultivating the fodder crops. However, having said this, like training need to be in a small groups, only with a few crops. Who will do it? That's a very important aspect. I have already told you that the institutional support available in the country for the forage innovations is not robust. Yeah, we need to understand what it means. Is that we have a very less human resource who can very confidently speak about the fodder innovations or forage innovations. So this is very important. There is only less human resource available in the country about fodder production aspect, about preservation aspect, about the conservation aspect. This is the missing link we need to understand. Second thing is, what happens is, because of lack of understanding about the different fodder crops and their suitability to different rainfall regime or climatic regime or different niche areas, there is a tendency of mismatch. I have seen many times the seed of berseem being sent to the South Indian states for cultivation, for giving it to the farmers. But the berseem crop definitely requires a very low temperature. It is suitable for the northern part of the country. Nobody to blame here, no offense on anybody, but it happens. So we need to be careful about that. The third thing is seed source. I have mentioned no private industries involved in the seed production of the fodder crops. It's really challenging task to get the quality seed of perennial grasses and legumes. So some of you might have yesterday heard about one of my colleagues talking about the participatory forage seed production that was initiated mainly to meet out the requirement of forage seeds demand. But we need to be very careful because most of the forage seeds have germination percentage not more than 30%. We have to understand this. And even when we take up the cultivation aspect of the, because I told 30% of the seeds only what happens to remaining 70 seeds or 70% of the seeds. We need to understand what farmers they do is they sow the seeds and then they will see very poor germination. They plow the land, they take up some other crops. Next year they come to us and they say the seed whatever I have purchased was very poor germination. So I did not grow this. So while giving the seed to the farm, good transfer of know-how to them. We have to tell the farmers, look, I'm giving you 100 seed here. You need to sow like this. The way you have to sow is the seed is extremely small. So it has to be sown and not in at a depth, but not more than half a centimeter depth. It has to be very shallow sowing has to be done. That we need to educate. And also we need to tell if you take up this sowing, only 30 seeds will germinate. We have to understand how to overcome that. Then you have to tell that if I am telling that 1 acre land requires 2 kg of seed, you can put 3 kg or 4 kg. You have to use the extra seed. Or you have to tell some of the crops what they do is only 30 seeds will germinate in the first year, and then the second year remaining 30 seeds, and third year remaining 40 seeds will germinate. That's how they behave because these are of a grass family. So, but what we can say, educate farmers is even if only 30 seeds germinate, just don't worry. They will come up. They spread. They cover your entire area. One of the bad notion happened is for the Stylosanthes seeds. What happened is there was huge demand for the Stylosanthes seeds during the 1990s because of the watershed programs. But all of a sudden, fine day, the government decides we are not going to purchase the seeds of the Stylosanthes seeds because we are getting only the spurious seeds. What was lacking is the lacking part was that none of them are aware that the percentage of germination is only 30%. And second thing was they were not aware about how to take up the sowing. This is very important. Educating farmers is must if we want to succeed. Here I have shown us, given a series of photographs. You can see how the Stylosanthes looks. 20 days, little bit of growth, and 40 days good growth, and by 90 days beautiful growth. You don't see any bare soil at all, even with the only little germination percentage. So we need to educate the farmers to have patience, observe the crop, and leave the crop for 30 days. What it requires at the most, is 1 or 2 weedings in between. Otherwise, nothing else. So we need to educate the farmers. It's very important. Before that, we need to educate ourselves so that we are confident in convincing the farmers. The big challenge of socio-economic aspects is the land availability for the fodder cultivation. It's a huge challenge because earlier I mentioned that the land holding size is very less. So this is a big challenge. The land, labor, capital are 3 important factors of the but I mentioned 80% of all kinds of livestock are owned by the small and marginal farmers. With that with them, availability of labor is not an issue at all. They have enough labor availability. But what is the issue here is land. And we need not to get disheartened. As a forage extension workers, we need not to get disheartened. When the land is so small, why is that they are talking about fodder innovation? Where do I ask the farmers to cultivate them? This question will definitely come into our mind, but we can ask the farmers always find some niche areas. I will mention you here around 2 or 3 niche areas where we can introduce the fodder crops. When large farmers are there who would like to take up dairy farming as a major commercial enterprise, then they'll definitely infertile land. No issue. It just soil type, the water resource, other resources available. We can ask them to go ahead with these particular crops. But when it comes to the small farmers, the one of the land issue is really a major aspect. So this one of the issue could be we can motivate them to cultivate the grasses on the bunds. Here I have shown two photographs how beautifully the grass can come up on the bunds. By growing grass on the bunds, we can educate them that it stabilizes the bund. No soil erosion. At the same time, they can let loose their animals on bunds for grazing, or they can cut and feed it to the animals. Yeah, we need to educate them about this aspect. Especially if they have a black soil, then bund stabilization is a big challenge for them. Every year almost they need to put a fresh bunds. So if we have a farmer with a black soil, we can as well straight away convince them that you can take up some of these grasses, which are not very long growing, but short statured grasses can be asked to grow with all these added benefits. What are the other benefits? The farmers can get it. So the field bund is one of the niche area. The second is pond embankment I'm talking about. And now a lot of farmers are coming forward in the field. This particular farmer hardly has got has got around 3 acres of land. So like the farm pond and all along the farm pond embankment, he can take up the crop. Or the crop he has cultivated, it was like way back in 2003, and even now after 17 years, if you go, you can see the same crop in his farm pond embankment. So we can convince them that they can grow this short statured crop. The crop he has cultivated is a Brecheria decumbens, that is commonly called as a signal grass. One of the advantage of signal grass is that it not only contains the soil erosion, at the same time it remains relatively green even in summer season. That is the advantage. And these two below photographs are of our own farm. We have, you can see the soil type. It's a dugout soil, absolutely no soil. You can find only the gravels and stones. Even with this kind of this one, what we did is in 2007, we have planted this grazing guinea on the farm pond embankment. Our duty was to just to plant the grazing guinea root slips, and second thing, we might have taken up one weeding. That's it, because it's very difficult to even take up weeding because of the slope. But now, even in 2020, if you see there, then absolutely there is no effect, no soil erosion. It has very well stabilizing, as well as we do collect the seed from this patch. So frankly speaking, not just the grass, we do collect the seed from this patch. One thing I just want to pass on the message that all the grass seeds are priced very high. They are very expensive. So we have to treat them as a high priced commodity, and we have to be, we must ensure that the seeds are properly collected and not wasted. This is the message I just want to convey. So there are many of the types, like this one is a signal grass, this is the grazing guinea, which we can encourage farmers to adopt in their field. One more niche area which is very, very important niche area is the orchards and plantations. It's very important. This especially provides a huge scope for introduction of forages. This really provides a huge scope. But what criteria we should follow is we should ensure that the planting distance for the horticulture crops, maybe mango, apple, or sapota, or guava, or coconut, whatever you name. The planting distance must be minimum 6 meter, must be there. Why I'm telling here is the width of the tractor along with the attachment takes nearly 4.5 to 5 meter. Yeah, that much of space is required to take up any of the intercultivation or aspects. Very close planting the distance is there. We can even introduce the fodder crops because we have some of the fodder crops which are shade tolerant, can come up very well even with the 90% of the shading. But usually we have decided the criteria of having a minimum of 6 meter distance, and age of the trees should be above 6 years, because the canopy will be there, then the farmers will be unable to use that land. Otherwise, initially they do grow some of the pulse crops. So above 6 years, then because of the canopy spread, they won't be cultivating any of the crops. So we can identify such of the orchards or plantations and encourage the farmers to grow the fodder crops. We did analyze around 43 fruits of the country, and we have identified around 23 fruits and plantation crops. We analyzed what is the scope available in terms of the area availability, estimated fodder production, and estimated the animals we can feed it, and we could get a very impressive result. Because of this, what we did is we went into one of the project in the year 2013 and 16 to introduce the fodder innovations in the mango orchards, and it was a 3-year project. So you can see some of the pictures I'm sharing here, because in extension pictures speak a lot. So then what we did is, I was talking about the multiple benefits the fodder crops can bring in. Here I'm showing the tree rows of the mango trees. In one patch, what we have done is we have planted the signal grass, you can see here, and the very next row is left is left as it is without planting any grass the either side. Okay. After some days, here we have not cultivated any fodder crops. You can see here the lot of weed dominance. You can see even the parthenium, the white patches, they all indicate the parthenium. But the next to it, where we have cultivated the grasses, you can see not even a single full spread of the crop. So one of the advantage of growing fodder crops in between two species is it smothers the weed. Yeah, it doesn't allow weeds to come up. That's the one of the great advantage. And here, second, you can see here this particular line is a slopy line, and even it contains the soil erosion. That is very important. So when we, at the end of the 3-year project, we could cover more than officially we targeted only the 50 farmers, but from farmer crossed more than 100 farmers and more than 120 acres of the land at the end of the 3rd year. So the benefits, what we can say, what farmers realized is, we could be classified into 3 aspects. On livestock rearing, the farmers mentioned that the expenditure on feed reduced by half. It increased the milk yield. It also saved them the distance every day they used to traverse to fetch the fodder, as well as it saved the labor. The second thing is on mango orchard, what they said is orchard temperature reduced because of the improvement in the microclimate, weed intensity definitely reduced, soil erosion reduced, and even water penetration introduced, because most of the fodder crops will add organic matter to the soil. That is one of the aspects. The second thing is even they have observed reduction in the pests and diseases. The project was a multidisciplinary project where the entomologists and other discipline people were involved. They observed all these things with the frequent visits. They took the observation, and their conclusion was it reduced. So on the farmer side, okay, we are developing some of the extension lead farmers in the villages on fodder innovations. They have now connected. They have connected with us. They have a better access for the improved access for the information, have access for the improved seed and propagation material, and overall because of the milk production there is an improvement in the family nourishment. So these are the multiple benefits. We can educate the farmers on these aspects. At the end of the 3 years, they told that the earlier the fodder shortage was experienced by 60% of the farmers, and at the end only 10% of the farmers still had the fodder shortage experience. It is because of the more bigger herd size and the less land availability. And average shortage of the fodder before was 50% of the requirement, 9% of the requirement. This we need to note down. Having seen the success in the mango orchard, IGFRA decided to extend this further with the second phase from 2016 and 19. And I was advised mainly to focus on the coconut farmers or coconut plantations. The coconut plantations, when I contacted the district where the coconut is grown largely, the one of the problem was the water shortage was there. So here we have given only the rain-fed grasses. The fodder, the crop you are seeing is perennial fodder sorghum. It is perennial in nature. It's rain-fed, and during summer it completely dries, and with a little shower again it comes up beautifully. So this is the perennial fodder sorghum we have introduced. Again, it was a 3 year period. You can just see how happy the farmers are, and even they gave the different experiences. And one of the experience is it consumes less water, grows very fast, and productive use of interspace, ease of harvest. These are the some observations the farmers have given. And we did encourage even the seed production because the seed of perennial fodder sorghum has got a huge demand. We did buy it and give an additional income to the farmers. Apart from these socio-economic aspect, the one need to aware in transfer of the fodder innovation, I would like to take under just 1 or 2 minutes just to share some of the commercial opportunities available for the farmers in forages. The first one is sorghum stover processing and sale. The sorghum stover is perceived as the best dry fodder in Karnataka, at least in southern part of the country. So the Maldandi sorghum that is grown in the Rabi season has got a good dry matter content, and this is one of the business which is done in 3 districts of Karnataka, Belagavi and Vijayapura districts of Karnataka, and it goes to as far as Mumbai, Gujarat, Ahmednagar, even in a coastal region like Kerala. It is sold, and it is just it is sold at the rate of 6 to 8 rupees a kg. When I took up this project some few years before, now the rate must be much more higher. This is how what they do is they just send it. But when it comes to paddy straw, we can think of making a bale and sell it. See, these are some of the bales prepared in my institute. And what is the advantage of baling is it reduces 1/7 of the volume. So the transportation cost is really saved. The whole business in Karnataka about the sorghum stover is, it is done in only 4 villages. That amounts to nearly 23 crore rupees. The other commercial opportunities available is about the lucerne seed production. Lucerne has got a huge value. It is considered as the queen of forages because of its wide variety of benefits it brings in. So this is mainly done in Gujarat, and you can see lot of farmers are involved in the seed production aspect. Each kg of the seed is sold at a price of more than 600 rupees, 700 rupees, and 800 rupees in our neighboring Maharashtra region. This is one of the huge opportunity. When I have visited Leh and Ladakh region, I could see that this crop growing everywhere, and this is one of the best opportunities the people of the region can exploit it. And it has got a value of more than 100 crore rupees. And this project, I did it around 5 to 6 years before. So this is one of the opportunities we can educate farmers to take up. And these are some of the opportunities where they don't have any competitors at all. Whatever they do is a novel product that we need to convince the farmers. And third is about the loose leaf production. The leaf mill is nothing but what the farmers do is they just grow the crop, they harvest it, dry it for only 1.5 day, not more than that, because the green color need to retain. And then they, before drying, they chaff it and dry it. The buyers are mainly the stud farmers, very rich people. And when I did the survey, it was going at the rate of 45,000 rupees per ton of leaf. It may not be restricted only to the lucerne crop. It can be expected even to the other leguminous crops, maybe even for the Subabul. I know even Subabul leaf meal is produced by the farmers of Andhra Pradesh region. So this is another huge opportunity. It is having a huge demand even from the poultry industry. We need to understand. So okay, so I'm coming lecture and yeah, is it open for discussion? The organizers must tell me.
Is the session over, ma'am? Are you going to continue with the presentation, or do you want to take questions?
No, I want to take the questions, if any.
Sure, sure. Please ask participants, ask questions if any they have.
Madam, good morning, madam. I'm Dr. Hari Krishna from Andhra Pradesh Veterinary College.
Yes.
Hello,
Yes,
madam.
please. Question,
Madam,
please.
where the lucerne seeds are available, madam, for sale?
Yeah,
We have the contact
seeds
lucerne lucerne seed
are
contact
available
number.
with us in a limited quantity. Yeah. What I will do is, what we have done is, we have tested their material. We have visited seed processing plant. We know, we are sure that there are no like contaminated seeds. What is that crop? Chicory seed is not getting mixed up. So we can direct you to those farmers. You can drop me an email. I will
Shall I email my
share you
email ID, madam?
the details.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
okay?
yeah. Okay, madam.
Now, how it is going to happen? I don't know. The organizers must. Can I spell it?
Ma'am, sorry?
Email ID, madam.
Yeah. And what I will do? Give my. I
Isn't
will
it
give
on
my
the
number.
isn't it on the first slide
Or
of
you can.
presentation, ma'am?
I don't think it is there in the first slide. I'll just check.
Yeah, please project that first slide, madam, again.
Yeah, just. Yeah. I don't think it is there in the first slide. I will type it here.
Sure, ma'am. In the
Yeah,
chat window, you can type.
Yeah.
it is not there, madam.
It's there. Are you able to
Yeah,
see
it is.
One minute, madam.
Yes, it is.
It is? Okay. Just drop a mail here, Krishna Prasad or Hari Prasad?
Hari Krishna, madam.
Hari Krishna. Please drop me a mail.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, madam. Okay.
Any other questions? VV Hari Krishna, do you have any question?
No, sir. My question is over, sir. Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. It
Yeah,
is Dr.
please.
Ghulam Rasool
Ghulam
here.
Rasool, sir. Please go ahead, ask your question.
Okay. Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah, you are audible. Please ask.
Okay. I have a query for ma'am. Ma'am has given very nice presentation and it was very informative as far as socio-economic point of view is concerned. So,
Thank you.
ma'am mentioned that I am basically working in a veterinary college, Sukast. So, you mentioned, ma'am, that veterinarians go to their diagnostic and treatment part and no one cares about the research regarding fodder. My suggestion is that there needs a collaborative work we should develop collaborations between agronomists and veterinarians, because unless you know the good results of a fodder, you cannot grow fodders randomly. So we have problems like region-specific mineral deficiencies in animals. So we need collaboration in this part so that we can grow the fodders which can grow the fodders which can come up with these mineral specific mineral deficiencies,
Hello.
region specific mineral deficiencies.
Hello.
Hello.
Nasir.
Yeah, ma'am. He's asking.
Yes, yes. Now,
Was the
now
question not
sorry.
audible? Hello.
Yeah, and I got the question. Like, yeah, I got the question. Can
Ma'am,
I
it is
answer?
not the question, it is ma'am suggestion only.
Yeah, suggestion. So to say.
Suggestion. Oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's well taken. It's well taken.
okay, okay, ma'am. One question lies in my mind that you have mentioned sorghum. Sorghum in orchards,
Yes,
land niches and bunds, pond
yes,
embankments, and orchards as alternate fodder
yes.
cultivation alternatives. So among them, sorghum you have mentioned. If we grow sorghum with mangoes, ma'am,
Mm-hmm.
uh, what was the suggestions of your entomologists about growing sorghum with the fruits? Because sorghum naturally has some pests, worms, and aphids. Will not they affect the normal fruit production of the plants where you grow the sorghum? Ma'am, please explain this.
Okay. Actually, what I mentioned is about the perennial fodder sorghum. Okay.
Okay, okay,
This is not the grain sorghum. This is the
okay,
crop. I'm just putting it on the slide. This is the crop. This is the perennial fodder sorghum grains. Okay. Its seeds are also black. It's a cross between annual sorghum with another grass, and it is not having any pest and disease attack. That is the good thing about the crop. So because your question referred to annual sorghum, but what I spoke is about the perennial sorghum. This can be just introduced and allowed to grow for 5 to 6 years. You're getting my
okay,
point? Yeah.
okay, okay,
And
ma'am.
regarding the observations of our entomologist, I did not put the scientific slide here. What he has done is he has done observations on mango as a sole crop, mango with fodder as a mixed crop, as an intercrop. And then he has observed the pest and disease load over the years. And at the end, he has considered that there is no significant difference between the sole mango crop and mango crop with the grass or fodder. Yeah,
Okay, okay, ma'am.
yeah, yeah.
So, ma'am, what about it is control? It helps in controlling the weeds. So, what is the mechanism?
Management side. Yeah, weeds definitely it smothers the weed. I have given you some. I just showed you some of the photograph. We do have a data about it, but here because it was on a socioeconomic dimension, only from that point of view, I have shown the slides. Definitely, it smothers the wheat right after 3 months of cultivation, because see, fodder it spreads, the tussock gets big, and there is no scope for the any weeds to come up. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you very much.
Thank you. What's your good name, please?
My good name is Ghulam Rasool
From?
from J&K, ma'am, Srinagar.
Okay, nice to speak to you, Gulam.
Can I have a submission, ma'am? Good afternoon.
Yes, please.
This is Dr. Nisar. I am working as assistant professor in the sericulture faculty of SCOST Kashmir.
Okay. Good afternoon.
My submission is we are rearing these silkworms during the off season. But we feed them with the mulberry leaf. As you know, mulberry is of your interest also.
Yes.
Now, what we do during the off season when the quality of the leaf is not that good, we go for the fortification of that leaf with some nutrients, proteins, etc.
Okay.
Is there any such provision in this animal feed wherein during the off season, if the quality of the feed is not that good, in order to enhance that quality, we will go for the fortification of that feed?
Yeah, actually, there are nowadays fodder type of mulberry species are available. You may be aware about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, and second thing is regarding the fortification. I must admit here that I don't have any knowledge about it. And probably some of the scientists in Bangalore, they are working on, the institute name is National Institute on Animal Nutrition and Physiology. They are located very near to the Silk Belt of Karnataka, and they are working on it. I have just heard about it or read about some of the papers, but I'm not very confident to give you advice, Gulamji.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
But you can as well just drop a mail. Definitely, they will respond.
Okay. Thank you, madam. No
Lot
issues.
of
Okay, thank you.
lot of work they have done. That I can tell you.
Actually, my point was that we are doing it in sericulture. We are doing it in sericulture.
Yeah,
My
but
point
only
was,
a fortification.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would
Regarding
like to
that.
submit here, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good
Very nice
morning.
presentation. I am Dr. Sohail from
Yeah, I
Srinagar.
got Suhail. Yeah, I could make out Suhail. Very
And
good morning.
very nice presentation, ma'am. Thank you for your presentation. For the knowledge of Dr. Nisar, sir,
Thank
I
you
would
so
like
much
to
for the
submit here
opportunity.
something. Yeah, I would like to
Okay, please.
submit something. There is
Yes.
there is, just like in sericulture, you do fortification. In fodders also, we go for fortification. We go for agronomic and agronomic fortification, as well as using breeding techniques or molecular techniques, where we go for fortification of fodder. So that is taken care of. And also, so for example, crop residues or haze, which are, stored for over the period of time, their quality gets deteriorated. There is a provision that we go for urea treatment or adding molasses to the
Yes,
hay.
exactly. That's my point. Yes.
So that is in itself a fortification process. So we go
Yeah,
for fortification in fodders also.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Suhail.
Any other question or query for ma'am?
Madam, good morning. Hello.
Very good morning.
Ma'am, normally,
Yes, please, ma'am.
normally sorghum is not shade tolerant, ma'am. But it's shown that perennial sorghum is growing under coconut orchards. So my question is here is, which perennial sorghum varieties are suitable under orchards, ma'am?
Okay. Actually, the moment we think about the sorghum, we think about the annual sorghum. But the point I just want to put across is, this is the sorghum which is crossed with the grass. You're getting my point?
Yes, madam.
So it definitely behaves differently.
Okay, ma'am.
It behaves more like a grass.
Yes, madam.
And any grass you can observe, they grow in less fertile soil, they grow under any of the hard conditions, they don't look for any of the favorable conditions. Okay, even I have grown this fodder sorghum in a mango orchard, which are like 40 to 50 years old trees, lot of shade. They have come up beautifully, no issues at all. But the thing here is, what we need to understand is, we are talking about the perennial sorghum, which behaves more like a grass, okay, wild grass. When it comes to the variety, there are only two varieties in the perennial sorghum, that is COFS 29 and COFS 31. We have promoted basically COFS 29. This year, in the third phase of the project, we have given the same seeds to the Lucknow region, collaborated with one of the scientists there, and he was also expressing the same concern. But let us see, like in the third phase, how this grass behaves in the Lucknow region. We will be able to ensure that yes, it's a shade tolerant. As far as southern India is concerned, it is growing very well.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Any other question, please?
Madam, good afternoon.
Yes, please. Good afternoon, sir.
This is C.H. Ramakrishna. I'm from Veterinary University, Hyderabad, madam.
Okay, good afternoon, Ramakrishna.
Working as a assistant professor. As you
Okay.
mentioned that the Kutti, the sorghum stover.
Got the point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got
So that is a very
point. Yes,
big
please.
very big business nowadays in Hyderabad and surrounding areas. Yeah, in Hyderabad it is
Okay.
they are selling around 11 rupees per kg.
Yeah,
Yeah, in
yeah, I
peak
understand
period
that.
it is go up to
Okay.
12, 13 rupees also in May, in summer months, April and May. So
Yes,
that is a very
yes.
good. I know more. I inquired with the people, the traders. They are saying that this kutti will come from the Karnataka, but you rightly mentioned that the where exactly it is coming from.
Okay,
And
okay. And if you visit Dharwad, I can take you to the spot also.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
one more
yeah.
addition, madam. Here, some of the young
Ah,
farmers they are trying with the silage. So they are preparing the
okay.
silage in Telangana region. They are preparing the silage and they are making the silage bales, plastic wrapped silage, and they are selling at the rate of 6 rupees per kg the silage. So people now,
Yes.
gradually the people they are turning towards the silage. Why? Because silage having more nutrient values than this kutti or
Yes.
stover, chaffed stover.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that is
I
also
understand
taking
that.
a very momentum, taking a good momentum in Telangana region. Simply what they are doing, they are purchasing the maize, which is cultivating for the purpose of grain. Before
Hmm.
setting of seeds, they are and collecting or
Harvesting.
purchasing from the neighborhood farmers, and they are
Farmers.
making into the silage. And they especially the silage making machines they came. Simply they
Hmm.
will make the 50 to 60 kgs of silage bale with all perfectly wrapped with the plastics, and they are selling. So that is also one kind of business taking momentum nowadays in Telangana region, madam. This is my
Yeah.
experience
Yeah.
I shared with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. It's indeed a good information, and I'm really encouraged as a being a forage worker because I understand that anything that is starts with the forage crops and they don't have a competitors, but we understand there is a huge demand. It's only the networking that matters to take up that business. Yeah, even farmers in Karnataka, they are doing it, this silage selling business. Thank you so much for the information.
Any other question? If there are no further questions, I think we have
Yeah,
concluded the session. Thank you, ma'am, on behalf of NADCL and on behalf of the participants. It was such a wonderful presentation from your side, plus the interaction from all the participants and from you was such a wonderful thing to see. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot. We would like to hear more of you in the few coming sessions, or maybe next workshop or training. Thanks a lot.
thank you so much. I just would like to thank my colleague over there, Dr. Suhail from our regional station of IGFRA, and also I would like to thank the NADCL for giving me this opportunity to connect with you all and share my experiences. And definitely, I would like to extend a very warm, heartful thanks to all the participants who have took the effort of sparing their time here and listening to me. Thank you
Ma'am,
so much.
ma'am, also if you could reply to my email with the presentation also, if that is possible to share the presentation, I would also share it on YouTube of this. The session will be shared, was recorded and will be shared on YouTube. If you could give us the presentation, I will be sharing the presentation also as a part of the YouTube video.
Yes, please go ahead with that. Should I send it to your email
Yeah,
link
yeah,
or
yeah.
have you downloaded?
No, no, you could
Yeah.
send it to me. You could send it to me.
Okay, sure. I will do that. I will do that.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot
Okay.
for your time. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
participants, we may all leave and join back at 2:30.